You're listening to Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe of Torch in Houston, Texas. This is the Jewish Inspiration Podcast.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the Jewish Inspiration Podcast. We are just off the heels of discussing the gate of forgetfulness, where the author in the Orchos Tzaddikim gives us the tools of how to overcome forgetfulness in chapter 20. Today we're going to chapter 21, the 21st gate, and that is the gate of silence. And we are on page 651 in the Treasure for Life edition of the Orchos Tzaddikim in the Ways of the Righteous. Shtika is silence. Silence. Shtika me'advarim Omer Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Silence is one of the things that Rabbi Gamliel said, Kol yomai gadalti bein hachacham v'lo matzati laguf tov mishtika. Says Rabbi Gamliel in the Mishnah and Ethics of Our Fathers, that my entire life I grew up among the sages, and I have found nothing that is better for one's self than silence. Silence. What a powerful thing silence is. This is Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 1, Mishnah 17. And King Solomon, what does King Solomon have to say? We bring a lot of quotes from King Solomon. V'chein Amar Shlomo Melech, alav hashalom. The smartest of all men, the wisest of all men. What did he say about silence? He says, Ki evil macharish chocham yechoshev. He says, even a fool who keeps quiet is considered wise. What does that mean? You know what they say? They say, I thought you were smart till you opened your mouth. This is from King Solomon. King Solomon teaches us that even a dumb person, when they keep their mouth shut, they're considered wise. They're considered wise. As soon as you open up their mouth, you say, I thought you were smart, but now I know you're not. You know, it's like that type of thing. It's like you verified. Silence is a very powerful thing, not only because of the things that someone says that may be silly. If we think for a second, sometimes people talk and that does not allow them to listen. If they just stopped talking and they listened, they would hear a totally different story. They would hear a different picture that can enlighten them. But sometimes people don't realize the importance of staying silent and not getting into too much chatter. V'amar hachacham, what else did King Solomon teach us? Keshani medaber eschoret al ma she'amarti, v'keshani shosek lo eschoret. He says, King Solomon says, when I speak, I will regret what I have said. And when I'm silent, I will not regret. You'll never regret being silent. You'll never regret being silent. V'im eschoret al shtika pam achas, eschoret al dibur pam pa'amim rabbis. He says, and even if I regret silence once, so, I shouldn't have stayed silent. But just remember that the regret for speech will be many times. So, speaking, I always tell my children that they have 2 ears and 1 mouth. That means you should be listening double what you speak. 1 mouth, 2 ears. Listen more than you speak. So he says, Kishani medaber hu hadibur moshel bi. Ki im ani medaber al adam davar shehu hagun she'eino hagun also hadibur moshel bi umatzricheni lihikona lefanov ulevakish meno mechila v'kishe'eni medaber ani moshel mila amroi ulastiroi. He says, when I speak, my speech rules over me. For if I speak wrongly of another person, that speech rules over me and compels me to humble myself before him and beg for forgiveness. If I speak negatively about somebody, so I'm going to have to ask them forgiveness. I'm sorry that I said that. It wasn't truthful. It wasn't honest. I exaggerated. I embarrassed you. Things that we say can be harmful to other people. And I'm going to have to now humble myself and beg for forgiveness. But when I do not speak, I control not saying it and concealing it. Okay, I control not saying it and concealing it. And our rabbis taught us, Shnei dikologin hoyu omdim lifnei Andrianus Caesar. 2 advocates stood before Hadrian, one advocating speech and the other silence. Echad haya melamed al dibur shehu yafeh, ve'echad melamed al shtika shehu yafeh. They were both going at it Which one is better, talking or remaining silent? Heichata omer, amar lo mori ilmole hadibur heicha malachim mismalchim ba'olam. So basically, the king said to the advocate of speech, what is your case? Tell me, why do you think that speech is so good? He replied, my master, if not for speech, how could kings rule over the world, in the world? You need to speak. You need to be able to gain power, gain influence over others. Hey chasfinos porshos layam. How can ships set out to sea? Hey chamesim nigmolim chesed. How could the dead be shown kindness? Hey chakalos miskalsos. How can the brides be praised? As the Talmud tells us, that one of the things that we do in front of a bride, what do we do in front of a bride? We say, Kala no'ava chasuda. How beautiful, how pleasant is this bride. There's an argument, we discussed this previously, the argument between Shammai and Hillel, where they were talking about what should you tell the bride. One says, Kala no'ava chasuda, you have to say that she's beautiful. The other one says, Kala kamoshi, say the honest truth about her. What do you mean? I'm going to say the honest truth. Should I say that the makeup isn't good? Should I say that her hair looks terrible? What do you mean I should say the way it is? So our sages teach us what the rabbis are telling us, not that you be brutally honest in the sense of saying the negative. Rather, you have to see the good. You have to say the essence of who she is. The essence of who she is really, really good. You have to find that good and say that truth. Don't make up things. Find the essence, find the core of their goodness, and that's what you need to praise, that's what you need to focus on. Either way, so without words, you can't do any of that. So how can you praise? How could business be conducted in the world? Heich, maso matan ba'olam, if not for speech. Without talking, you can't negotiate. Without talking, you can't sell items. Right? Try to sell a car without talking. Right? What do? They tell you, all the horsepower that this car has, and the safety features, and they talk and talk and talk. You're like, okay, just write up the contract. I just don't want to hear you talking anymore. So now he says, immediately the King Hadrian says, Yafe dibarta, you've spoken well. You've given a good argument for the power of speech. And then said the advocate for silence, La melamed ala shtika shehi yafe. Hey, shibachtas hashtika. So now he says, how can you espouse silence? He immediately arose to speak, whereupon the advocate of speech arose and struck him. Miyad baladaber, Omad oso shahaya melamed ala dibur shuhu yafe ustaro. Amar la melech lama satartalo. Also, the king asked him, why did you strike him? He replied, my master, Amar la Mori, ani limadati mishali al shali, ki limadati min adibur al adibur, v'zeh ba lelamed mishali al shalo. He says, I used the spoken word to promote speech. Right? I'm using speech to explain the power of speech. He says, but he is going to use speech to promote silence. That is why I struck him. Meaning, don't use my tool to defend your case. The only way, according to this, that you should be defending silence is by being silent. But you're standing up to use the power of speech to explain the power of silence. That's not fair. The other countered, but didn't King Solomon say, Hashem did not say that one should sit in silence like a mute, but in an abundance of words, offense will not be lacking, and he who spares his lips is wise. Birov dvarim lo yechtal pasha, v'choseich sefasov maskil. So he's saying like this, an abundance of words, offense is not lacking. Someone who speaks a lot, who talks a lot, they're going to hurt people, they're going to insult people, they're going to offend people. But he who is more cautious, someone who spares his lips, such a person is wise. Chosech perush, what does it mean when it says he refrains from speaking? Monea milidaber bechavero, is that he refrains from speaking against his friend. Not that he's silent, he talks. We have a mouth so that we should talk. But how should we talk? We shouldn't talk against our fellow. And we have no greater lesson, no greater teacher than Aaron, the high priest, and Miriam, who was the sister of Aaron and the sister of Moses. Shehabe'er ola umashke b'schus Miriam. We see that there is a great reward for Miriam, that the well arose and provided drink in the merit of Miriam. Why? And we see that the clouds of glory surrounded the Jews in the merit of Aaron, the high priest. And yet they allowed their mouths to speak against Moshe, and they were immediately punished. So we see that they used speech, and they were punished immediately because they used their speech negatively. And there are several causes that cause the departure of the presence of the Almighty, of the Shekhinah, from Israel. Chief among them is bloodshed, then idolatry, and then slander. Right? He says, We see that Lashon Hara, slander, speaking negatively about another person, using words that should uplift people to put people down, that is a very, very grave sin, something that we are punished severely for, putting other people down. I think in general, we have a terrible problem in our society, in our culture, with speech, particularly because of social media. Because what someone would be ashamed to say to a person to their face, they have no problem saying when they're behind a screen. When they're behind their computer monitor or their iPad or their phone, they can write nasty comments, they can say disgusting things. But to someone to be in front of someone and to say that, most people wouldn't do that. They have a certain dignity that they need to carry. And when it's behind a screen, they feel like they're shielded. And this is a terrible, terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. Why? Why is it a terrible thing? It's a terrible thing because we allow ourselves to harm other people, to insult other people, to even murder other people. And we see this, by the way, is for teenagers. Cyberbullying is a very serious thing. Kids who take their own lives because they were insulted, they were hurt, they were embarrassed, they were shamed in public. And, no one would really have the audacity to do that in front of them. But online, behind a screen, that's not a problem. I remember, this is many years ago, right at the beginning of the email age for children, when children were using email. I remember that it was brought to my attention that my son had sent an email to his classmates that was a little bit offensive to one of the kids. And it came to my attention, and I was very, very upset about it because I was afraid that this would escalate into something worse if it wasn't stopped immediately. So I called the school, and I spoke to the principal, and I said, if you don't mind, I would like my son tomorrow to give a speech to all the kids in the school of the older grades. He has a big apology to make. What happened? And I explained it to him. And I told my son that this was unacceptable and that I would not tolerate it. And there would be serious repercussions if he didn't properly apologize and regret what he did. And I explained to him what the damage could be. And sure enough, the next day I came to school and he gave a public apology to the individual that he had, let's call it, bullied. Even though it wasn't, I saw it. It wasn't terrible, but it still was something that was hurtful. And he spoke, I think it was 4 or 5 classes that were together in the assembly, and he spoke and said why this is not good and why this is unacceptable, why he'll never do this again, and why nobody should do this. And this is unacceptable behavior. So I think today, you see, even newspapers are willing to write murderous articles about people because they can. The laws of Lashon Hara don't apply. The laws of slander, the laws of the basic human decency that should be applied is gone because it's behind a screen, because I'm on television. Sensationalism is what sells. If it bleeds, it leads, right? So we have to say something terrible about somebody. And it doesn't make a difference if they're a mayor, if they're a state representative, if they're a governor, if they're an attorney general, if they're a state senator, a U.S. senator, a congressman, a president, a vice president, a spouse of a president, right? The first lady or the second lady. It doesn't make a difference who it is. It could be even the Ayatollah. We have to understand, like we're saying, we have to be very careful about the words we use. We have to be very, very careful. We say whoa, he's an evil person, so we can say whatever we want. We still have to be careful. The laws of Lashon Hara are different regarding different people, meaning certain people, it's okay to say Lashon Hara, the Chafetz Chaim says. People who are evil, you're allowed to speak slanderously about them. You're allowed to say negative things about them. However, says the Chafetz Chaim, don't do it. He says, why? Why not? Why shouldn't they do it? Because you're going to get into a habit of speaking negatively about people. And then you're not going to distinguish between those who are evil and those who are righteous. And you're going to talk like that about everyone. Person in general, I think what the author here is trying to train us is to see the positive in people. See the good in mankind. Don't see the bad. Don't say the bad. Also, words can be very hurtful, can be very damaging. And a person needs to be very, very concerned that their words aren't used to hurt another person, another human being. All right, so this concludes day 112.
You've been listening to Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe on a podcast produced by Torch, the Torah Outreach Resource Center of Houston. Please help sponsor an episode so we can continue to produce more quality Jewish content for our listeners around the globe. Please visit torchweb.org to donate and partner with us on this incredible endeavor.